Hello, my name is Emmett Follett, and I'm talking about the happiness presentation. And mine was on positive thinking and how over positive thinking can cause negative outcomes, even when you're using positive thinking. So you must balance your positive thinking. And so that's what this podcast was about. So the first slide. The theme of the podcast was balancing positive thoughts with negative thoughts. It starts off by talking about a book written in the 1950s about how if you use positive thought, positive things will come to you. Later on, it's talked about in the podcast that this is not true, that being too positive can cause individuals to be less effective, not really think about how they're going to achieve their goals, just using positive thinking to kind of push them through, keeping them happy. So you must balance your positive thoughts around your goal with the obstacles and challenges you face. So it's a happy mix of using positive thoughts to keep you going and pushing along, but at the same time, uh, realize and imagine your challenges so you're able to actually face those challenges when you need to. So the stories, like the story was talked about in the podcast to give a little bit more context. One of the stories was about Michael Phelps and his practices as a young boy with his swim coach. And it's his swim coach, and his swim coach talks about how he had trouble with Michael to change his swimming style to do 6 kicks for every 2 arm strokes instead of what he was doing 2 arm strokes or 2 kicks for every 2 arm strokes. And this caused some friction between him and his coach. But one of the things his coach told him to do was imagine his races in his mind down to the smell of the chlorine, down to the pool. He knows all these factors. He's already used to the smell of chlorine, so he can imagine this. And what they talk about is that studies actually show that uh, imagining scenarios or projects can help you develop and learn how to do those just as well as doing them. So they gave the example of Michael Phelps and his swimming in the pool. Him thinking about swimming in the pool might be just as effective as him uh, swimming in the pool during actual practice. And the positive thinking comes into effect during the 2008 Beijing Olympics, where Michael has goggle issues, but he ended up putting negative thinking into his positive thinking to allow him to combat the stress of the goggle issue. So he was able to tell how many strokes he would need to get from the to one side of the pool to the other. Another thing about imagining is they say that if you imagine in a study, they told people to imagine eating 30 M&Ms slowly. This caused people to eat the M&Ms. The people who thought about imagining eating the M&Ms, this caused them to eat the M&Ms slow or less. A personal example, I have pretty bad anxiety at times, so imagining the activities when I'm anxious helps. Imagining what I'm anxious about, what could go wrong. This is kind of like the if what then plan. So I have to imagine if things go wrong, how could I deal with it? And I never was a super positive person, so the first idea of trying to just use positivity to win your way through life never really made sense to me. I'm kind of more of a glass half empty person instead of a glass half full person. So textbook connections, I found a thing in chapter 3 talking about people who talk most in conversations view the conversation as positive. So it's best to let other people talk so you can kind of put yourself back into perspective of how the conversation is actually going without getting kind of a over positive sense due to just you being the only one talking. So as it says, people who talk more in conversations view the conversation as more positive. So the more one talks, the more positive one tends to feel. So let others talk to put yourself back into reality in the conversation. And kind of what would be the obstacle? Sit in silence is the obstacle because it makes you question how you talked and if you talked properly, if you said the right things. So sitting in silence is the obstacle, is the challenge, and is what puts you back into reality, not to being too positive. So my takeaways, use your mind to imagine challenges or scenarios to be better prepared. The if-then plan. What are your desires and goals? What are your obstacles in your way of your goals? And how would you deal with these obstacles? So that's the plan that kind of is about this whole thing. Balance positive thoughts with realistic negative thoughts or challenges. And people who tend to be just positive tend to do worse than people who factor in negative thoughts. I appreciate everyone uh listening and appreciating feedback. Thank you. Bye.